I heat up, I can't cool down. Got me spinning round and round, round and round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. You call my name, burning flame, full of desire. Kiss me, baby, let the fire get higher. Abracadabra, I wanna reach out and grab you. Abracadabra, abracadabra. You make me hot.
Welcome to the 70s versus the 80s. This is Wolfman Mike. And as you can tell from our intro, we're going to be talking $6 Million Man versus the Bionic Woman. And today I am joined by longtime contributor Brian, aka Bri-Guy, but don't call him Fry Guy. And that's right, today we're also going to be talking fast food from the old days versus the slightly less fast food of today. But first things first, you may have noticed I opened up with the song Abracadabra. That's an 80s song. It came out in 1982, so hence a song that comes out in the 80s is an 80s song. And I feel it has a very 1980s sound to it. And I'm sure most of you pretty much know who the artist is that recorded that song. But in case you don't know who recorded that song, you would surely know him as a 1970s artist. In fact, I would say he kind of has the 1970s quizzidental sound that just rings 1970s whenever you hear about it. You don't know who I'm talking about? Well, take a listen.
'Cause I'm right here, right here, right here, right here at home. 'Cause I'm a picker, I'm a grinner, I'm a lover, and I'm a sinner. I play my music in the sun. I'm a joker, I'm a smoker, I'm a midnight toker.
That was 1973's The Joker, or how about this song?
Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. I want to fly.
That was from 1976, and I think you can guess the title. And I could give 5 other examples of 70s classics from this artist, but I'll just end it with this one here.
Far away, and I feel like it's all been done. Somebody's trying to make me stay. You know I've got to be moving on. Oh, big old jet airliner, don't carry me too far away. Oh, big old jet airliner, 'cause it's here that I've got to stay.
And knowing our listeners like I do, I think everybody knows this is the Steve Miller Band. And I think it's just a really good example of how he had so many great 70s hits. In fact, I just played a very small amount of them. And then he still went on to have a great 1980s song in Abracadabra. Later in the show, I'm going to have an example of an artist that started in the 1970s and then tried to continue their career on into the 1980s. And let's just say it wasn't quite as successful as the Steve Miller Band was at making that transition. But right now, what is that my ears hear? I can hear Brian driving 2 miles away as he is approaching the studio, and we are getting ready to talk $6 Million Man versus Bionic Woman.
Steve Austin, astronaut, a man barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man. Steve Austin will be that man. Better than he was before. Better, stronger, faster.
What's your very first earliest memory of that $6 million man? That show was from 73 to 78, so we were very young, probably like our first TV shows we remember.
Right. And I think we even probably started seeing it when it would be during the summer and they would run it in syndication over the summer. They'd run the previous season. Um, and so it was fantastic as a little kid because of this, the slow motion, and of course the person that could just do all these things, had the tremendous vision, the strength, could jump. Because when you're, like you said, we were 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and just kind of starting to explore, moving about in this world. And with the neighbor kid, who's the late Sean Erstead, we would play this all the time, and it became a huge part of our play until Star Wars came, um, of pretending you're doing stuff in slow motion, and the sound, right? That bionic sound that they use. It was cheesy as all possible, but it was the '70s. That was what we had, and it was fantastic to play. You know, like you were a bionic man. What did it say? That $6 million man, which just call ourselves the bionic or the bionic kids. How did it react with you when you were first seeing it in the '70s?
Like I said, I think it's one of the first TV shows I remember, and I even remember we were watching it over at my dad's best friend's house, and my sister made us watch it. She goes, "There's a new show on," and I even remember it was the football episode, and I liked football, so that kind of got me in right away. And yeah, it was like you said. I like how you said before Star Wars, because it was the first touch of modern before we got into Star Wars. Like there wasn't really too many shows based on the modern or future technology, I guess, at that point. And yeah, the sound effects were everything. It was just, it's funny because I recently went back and watched the pilot episode, and very dry. They were trying to do where he crashed his, and it was during the time, 73, so it was right after NASA went to the moon, and they were trying to recreate it too much. They were being really technical and really showing you, and it was very dry.
Yeah, I think the original the pilot, maybe even the first three, were kind of meant to almost be made for TV movies. So they probably were trying to be more
Yep.
technical, more highbrow. Probably had a decent sized budget. But certainly, yeah, caught our imagination in that time frame because of going to space and things like that. Because after the Apollo stuff and going to the moon, the space program kind of languished for a while until the space shuttles came in, and that was like the late '70s and into the early '80s. So there was that time where there wasn't anything, and then this was, a former pilot and all the slow motion stuff, and then we have the technology, we can rebuild them, like, right, that was like probably the line that got into the lexicon the most, was that we have the technology.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Yeah, it was just like, and then I think the biggest television event I can remember is when they had the Bigfoot episode, which was really, like, I can remember what TV I was watching it, where I was sitting. Yeah, so that that was huge.
I found it interesting that you said, your dad's friend watched it. So I was thinking, we're looking at it from our memories back to our childhood, right? This is the main reason that you kind of started this podcast, and that I love being on it, is it's a walk down memory lane of stuff that happened in the '70s and the '80s. But with this one, I started to think, well, what if I looked at it as someone like our parents' age, our dad's age? And it goes into that middle-aged man porn role, but not so much as like what Three's Company, which has been a past show you've talked about. You can go back and listen to that episode, or the Dukes of Hazzard, which also was a previous episode. You can go back and listen to that one. It was more than just the the TNA and the on there. It was more of the we're going to improve, your body parts are being replaced, you have better vision. And as a person is probably on the backside of being middle-aged, that's very intriguing. Right? If you had a bionic knee, you wouldn't have to wear glasses, take your glasses off, get bifocals. You could be back to like what you were when you were in your 20s. That's very interesting, and I can imagine that was a little bit of the appeal for the people that were our dad's age at that time back in the 70s.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I was just kind of leading into the artificial knees and artificial hips. And he had the bionic ones, and it was to the ninth degree.
Well, right, and they don't quite have that now when people get, but the level of hip replacements, even going back to someone that kind of came to prominence in the 80s, Bo Jackson, when he ended up having to need his hip replaced and he could actually still play baseball at a major league level with it. That would be unheard of like in the 70s with that technology, but things are getting there. Um, but in the 70s, it certainly captured our imaginations.
What do you think about the action figure adding to its popularity? Yeah, that was just a very popular action figure. And
I think there was like the $6 million man mania did sweep the country in that middle 70s, before the Star Wars hit. Then the Star Wars took the action figures to a whole new dimension. But if you didn't want to get G.I. Joe, and we have to remember in the not the late 70s, in the early to mid 70s, we were just finishing up Vietnam War involvement, and of course that was very divisive in the country. And so G.I. Joe wasn't necessarily the great action figure for everyone, but the $6 million man who could catch someone's imagination outside of being G.I. Joe, even though he's a former Air Force pilot.
yeah, and maybe you're right. We're in Vietnam, getting out of Vietnam, and he was just such a clean cut, kind of feel good, kind of like a New Day Superman, kind of that corny, clean cut. Lee Majors, dating Farrah Fawcett, who was considered the most beautiful TV star at the time.
Right, and Charlie's Angels and her. Did they date, or were they even actually married for a while?
Yeah, they got married. Yeah. I don't know if they were dating. Yeah, I think their marriage broke up because she got Charlie's Angels and he had $6 Million Man, and they just were filming all the time, is what I read.
Right.
Into it.
I know how it is when we're recording so often here on the 70s versus 80s podcast. It's tough to keep a marriage going.
So, do you now we're talking about this came out of 70s after Vietnam. Do you think this came out in 73? What difference would have been if it would have came out in 83? I mean, I was just going to say, I think the 80s would have relied too much on the technology. It would have showed too much of the special effects, maybe. Like, maybe what made it work in the 70s was how limited they were by it. So they had to rely so much on the sound effects.
Right. And the slow motion, whereas if in the 80s, it's like 80s started to bring up movies like, first of all, there's like Knight Rider. I think that debuted in the mid 80s. And so it would have been along the lines of Knight Rider, where it would have been a lot of technology and a lot of flashing lights and things along those lines. Less of the the slow motion action, signifying that this is something technologically advanced, where it would be some lights and display. Maybe if it wouldn't have been made in the 70s and it was made in the 80s instead of Knight Rider, we would have had the $6 Million Man with David Hasselhoff.
That's what I was going to ask
around
you.
That.
That's what I was thinking too. You'd have
Germany. Germany would have loved it.
Would have loved it in Germany. We'd had a lot more. Our shirt would have been buttoned down a little farther, but I was trying to think who would play him in the 80s, and all I could come up was David Hasselhoff, and
David Hasselhoff. Or I know when you had the show around the Super Bowl, and The Longest Yard, it talked about like Fred Dreyer would have been that macho, just coming out of the NFL level. But I don't know if he had the personality to pull this off. So
if you were going to remake it today, would you make it into a movie Or would you make it into like a Netflix 8-part premium series?
Oh, right, right. What would if you and I were approached by Netflix, what would get us the biggest check? Would it be a movie, or would it be like 6 episode streaming extravaganza?
I think I'd go with the 6 episode, because
Yeah.
it was an episodic TV show. I would like, then you could have Bigfoot in one episode. You could
Yeah,
have,
you could do all the greatest hits of the episode. You could have one overarching storyline that would tie the whole thing together from beginning to end. Um,
yeah, and I would definitely introduce the Bionic Woman, and I'd keep them in the same series. I wouldn't split them up like they did
right.
before.
Yeah, there's enough airtime and screen time to have both of
Yeah.
them on there. Well, and right now, something that came out originally in 1980, Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1, is in a Hulu, like a 6 episode thing. That seems to be the mode now, is to have that streaming, and you can jump all the episodes at once and let people just binge it for a while and get that word of mouth out there so more eyeballs go in front of it. Whereas it seems like if it would be just a movie, right? If we made a made for TV 2 hour, you know, Bionic Man 2023, that it would just be lost in the noise. But if you're like, oh, we're having a 6 episode streaming event of Bionic Woman or Bionic Man with Bionic Woman going to be in it, and we're going to do the Big Soda episode, and kind of do an homage to the 70s, that'd probably get more eyeballs.
Yeah, I think it would be great. You could get like I don't know who you'd get to star, maybe Michael B. Jordan or Miles Teller, and one of those two.
I
And
could
then
see both of them, yeah.
I was thinking Bionic Woman could be Zendaya, who's like I hope I'm saying her name right, the star of the Spider-Man, the female lead in
Zendaya?
Zendaya, yeah,
Yeah.
because she used to play like a spy thing. She did some martial arts for on the Disney Channel when my
Well,
daughter used to watch.
having kids of an age where they would watch the Disney Channel, and one time living where you could be washing dishes and you could see out to where the kids were watching TV. She was on some like Wake Up Chicago dance or some kind of dance Chicago show on there back as a teenager. So it's interesting to see the teenager. You think nothing of it, and now like you said, it's been in Spider-Man and in I think she's on something on either HBO or streaming somewhere, Netflix. There's just so much stuff. It's so tough to keep up with everything nowadays. So back in the 70s, when it was 3 channels, it was easier to keep up with the $6 Million Man than it would be now if it was a 6 week special streaming event on Hulu.
Yeah, everything was so iconic back then. Like you said, it was on 3 channels, so we'd all knew the sound effects. It was all. Now you can't find anybody that's watching the same TV show as you, and
Right.
every show's good now, and you miss so many good ones just because you can't watch them all. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not enough time in the day to watch it all.
I was just thinking, it's kind of a shame they didn't bring it back. Okay, here's my idea for the 6-part or 8-part Netflix. Is it they really should have maybe done it in the early 2000s, but I would have thought like at the beginning they're like, there's a new guy that crashes, like Michael B. Jordan, Miles Teller, whoever you want to star in it, and then they have to rebuild him, and so they're bringing out Lee Major. You're like, oh, because Lee Majors is still alive,
Right.
so they're bringing him out, and you're like, we're gonna see the $6 Million Man. We're gonna see Lee Majors. What's he gonna look like now? And all of a sudden they wheel him out in a wheelchair, and he's got really bad PTSD, and he's in a wheelchair because the 70s technology that he was nuclear
Right.
powered. It kind of leached into his blood and stuff, and it's kind of made him wheelchair bound. and,
Yeah,
and you can hear.
Rusted out and everything like all the 70s cars are nowadays.
Yeah, and so everybody in the room's like, "Oh, what's wrong with it?" And his hearing's gone, but where he can hear everything at once, so he can hear everybody saying that and stuff. And they're like, Steve, we're gonna rebuild this new guy, and he's like, and Steve's like, I don't think that's and Steve's anti-technology.
Right.
He doesn't own a cell phone or anything. They're like, we're gonna rebuild this new guy. We want you to be a mentor of him, and he's like, I don't think that's a good idea. Look what happened to me. And then they're like, we're gonna use the latest technology, and then he just screams, you said the latest technology was used on me back then, and so look at where I am now.
Where are the upgrades?
Yeah.
I was thinking you were going to lead to a line of, well, $6 million doesn't buy what it used to.
Yeah, it doesn't buy. They're like, we're gonna call him the $6 billion man, and he's like, But yeah, so I don't know. I guess the whole series would be if you bought on, seeing him in a wheelchair, and then they're like, we could make an exoskeleton for you. We can make it so you can walk again. And he's like, he's just not having any of it. It's just like,
Oh, well, and then yeah, the exoskeleton, what you just brought up, it's like I wanted to touch base on this because then when Iron Man came out, that was a lot of that same, 6 billion or $6 million man stuff with the enhanced vision and the enhanced strength. It's just was a suit that Tony Stark made because he's so wealthy and intelligent. But it was kind of the same concept. So, making it in the 80s or 90s or 2000s, you could say Iron Man's kind of a remake of the $6 million man of sorts.
yeah. And what I like about the, $6 million man had Oscar Goldman. Batman had Alfred. I really like the new Iron Man where they made it a computer, where it's Jarvis as a computer protocol. I thought that was a great. It really switched it up, because
Yes.
the old assistant was getting kind of old.
Well, and the old assistant, it's like here's this, loner because his parents has been killed, or but yet he's got this trusted assistant. The only thing that I love the Jarvis concept and everything. The only problem I have with it is it's like boots up instantaneously, never freezes or anything. The Wi-Fi network that Tony Stark must be, way more amazing than anything.
Works out in outer space.
Works, yeah, exactly.
And like he's got all this jet fuel to fly around, but he's not storing it anywhere. He's got like a skin tight suit. Yeah,
Right.
DC, they had Cyborg. I mean, that was kind of the original title for $6 Million Man. It was based on a book called Cyborg.
Correct. And I've never read the book, but in looking back to refresh my memory on this, I did see it was based. Yeah, the made for TV movie originally was based on that book.
Yeah, and Cyborg. So yeah, I was kind of asking, and we already said it. What do you think a better title? Do you think $6 Million Man was the perfect title? Would you like Bionic Man?
The Bionic Man would have been better. The $6 Million Man.
I agree.
It doesn't age well.
Yeah, it's dated. It's Bionic Man is just. It's easier to remember. I mean, I think they kind of self-corrected by calling it Bionic Woman instead of calling it the $6 million. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense there.
And so we had the Bionic Woman was on. So 6 million was 73 to 78. Bionic Woman had 3 seasons from 76 to 78. It actually switched networks from ABC to NBC in the last season, and that's what kind of killed it because they didn't have any more crossovers between. The most popular episodes is when Lee Majors crossed over.
Exactly. And I had forgotten about that. How TV's shows would switch networks seemingly happen. I guess that still happens to this day. But how it would kill the momentum, because if you're used to being I'm watching ABC from 7 to 10 this night, and then the show goes, it's like, oh, I'm just going to watch whatever goes in place, because this was the era before remote controls.
When they switched networks, they stopped having the crossovers, and Bionic Woman actually got a new girl or a boyfriend that kind of killed it.
Yeah.
Nobody liked that. I mean, the last season did have Max the dog, which was super popular, but never appeared on screen with Steve Austin. So,
and it's like a lot of shows too, when they're getting close to the end, and they'll just add a new character, usually a new baby, and if it's a family, if it's a family sitcom, and then that just is kind of like it's the jump the shark moment. I don't know if you've talked about Happy Days on this or not about that, but I think that's in the lexicon enough that as soon as it adds something new to it, it's in the end times for the series.
yeah, and I mean, $6 Million Man didn't do that too. I mean, it was just Oscar Goldman, Lee Majors, and then Lindsay Wagner when she was the Bionic Woman. So they didn't really add. I think 5. I was really surprised to see it went 5 years. I felt like more like 3 or 4 years to me, but that's a pretty good runtime for the $6 Million Man.
It is, because they during that time frame they made more episodes in episodic TV than they do now. Like now it's 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes, and then there's a winter break, and then it'll come back in the spring, and they make less. And really, that you could only milk so many different plot lines out of it before it just kind of you're rehashing and redoing stuff. Which makes you think, like, I don't think you've talked about MASH, but like how MASH was able to kind of stay fresh and inventive for as long as it did is kind of out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Usually the shows do kind of have, unless it's straight comedy or whatever, kind of do have a point where you might as well end it. Definitely.
A third of its cast, and somehow it kept going. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how they got that to work like that.
Well, the people they brought in were different enough where it wasn't just, oh, we brought in, we lost McLean Stevenson as Colonel Blake, and now we brought in oh god, now Harry, the guy who played Sherman T. Potter, I can't remember, Harry Morgan.
Harry Morgan, yeah.
He was a different character, so he was like in the same role, but he wasn't just trying to be another actor playing what McLean Stevenson did. He played it differently, and that was part of why it could go on and stay seemingly fresh. It's because true to life, right? You're in a job, or any, if you do a after work activity, the activity stays the same, the job stays the same, but the faces do change, the personalities change, and the dynamics change, and then that's what MASH was able to do.
Yeah, I'll have to remember some of those MASH replacements, because I always think the greatest TV replacements of all time was when Woody replaced Coach on Cheers, because they were completely different, but both good. And then when Mr. Furley replaced the Ropers, again, totally different, but like both good in separate ways.
Yeah, and shout outs to Woody Harrelson and Don Knotts for playing them completely different, not trying to be a caricature of the person they're replacing.
Yeah, and we already talked about the disaster that was Coy and Vance Duke. That yeah.
Yes. And if you don't want to go back and listen to the Dukes of Hazzard episode again, just remember that some nefarious outsiders came into town to cause trouble. It got blamed on the Duke boys. They spent the rest of the episode trying to figure it out, and then at one point in time, the General Lee jumps in the air. And then that's kind of
during the commercial break. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's, because the Dukes of Hazzard kind of came out just as the these two, the Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man, were ending, and that went to kind of a swing back to being character driven, but the good old boys, and not anything out of the ordinary except for a superhuman car and dynamite bow and arrows that could magically blow up anything, wherever they shot them.
Yeah, with perfect aerodynamics with the heavy dynamite on it.
Yes.
And those were straight bows too. They didn't even have compound bows. So I think the $6 Million Man being in the 70s was what really made it. Because like in the 80s, it would have been two Knight Rider. Not like Knight Rider was a good show, but I mean, I don't think it has the lasting impact of the $6 Million Man.
No.
It just all the technology was there for Knight Rider, and you didn't have your imagination enough.
And can you think of because we're similar in our day-to-day life, we'll work in phrases from these shows from the 70s and 80s and songs from the 70s and 80s into conversations. I can't think of anything from Knight Rider. People don't talk into their wristwatch and say, Kit, meet me at the front door, or anything like that. I can't think of anything from Knight Rider, but with the $6 Million Man, it was the bionic sound, the slow motion, and we have the tech. We can rebuild them. We have the technology.
Okay, so that settles that. I think we decided that the $6 Million Man was the right show in the right time period, came around at the right time in the right place. But I think me and Brian are still going to work on a screenplay for a 6-part Netflix special. What do you guys think? So now, before we get into the fast food wars, I promised you guys I would tell you about a 70s band that tried to convert over to the 1980s, and it didn't go so well. Now, this is a group that actually came out in the late 1960s. They had that out of San Francisco with that psychedelic sound. Here's 1967's White Rabbit.
One leaves you, don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall.
And I think you'll also recognize their other 1967 hit.
Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love.
So, okay, they got some groovy 1960s hits, but then they keep it going into the 1970s. After a name change, they changed their name to Jefferson Starship, and they still keep it going. They have a kind of a cool 1979 song called Jane. But then, like what always happens on the 70s versus the 80s podcast, what we always talk about is they change out all the original cast members. None of the original band members are left in this group, and they change their name to Starship. And I think you can see what direction I'm going with. And yes, they tried to be an 80s band and release a 1980s hit. And from 1985, they released this song that now appears on many lists as the worst rock song ever recorded. I'm sorry I had to play that for you, but I just had to remind you what the 1980s sounded like when they went bad. But you know what wasn't bad in the 1980s? Fast food. You know why? Because it was actually fast back in the 1980s and 1970s. And me and Brian are here to tell you why.
I recently had watched a documentary, and there was a court case against McDonald's in either the late 70s or early 80s and I think it may have been the people that were behind H&R Puff and stuff, that a lot of their characters that they were using in their advertisements and in this whole McDonald's land kind of thing were direct ripoffs of the H&R Puff and stuff. They had to stop using them, all the Grimace and Mary McCheese and all those different kind of things. Because I remember in the 70s, growing up out in Coates, where there wasn't anything but the road going into town and the road going out of town and two bars, we would drive up into West St. Paul, Minnesota to go to McDonald's because there was a Playland. And it was a Playland that was so popular, they had a tram. You'd get your McDonald's, eat your McDonald's, and then you'd wait out and you'd take a tram and go up on a hill behind it, and then there was a Playland with slides and all these McDonald's characters. And then all of a sudden it kind of fell out of fashion. And back in the 70s or 80s, I had no idea. And then watching this documentary, it all made sense.
That's the same McDonald's Playland I went to, the one on top of the hill, and going on the tram. I remember I had my tennis shoes sucked off by the wheel well one time, and I think I had met the person that said they knew somebody that had the Grimace from that Playland, but I never saw it or anything. But yeah, you're right. That was a big deal. The characters, and now they're just gone. They don't show them at all, and maybe they went with the Fruit of the Loom guys. Remember the vegetable guys? Where are they now?
Yeah,
they probably got sued by V8 or something. I don't know. But as you can figure out, today we are talking old school fast food versus today's fast food. When you think old school fast food, what do you think of, Brian? What comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, it's McDonald's. It's back when it was still like million served and not billion served, and it was going in, and you could get the cheeseburger, or the hamburger, and there were behind the counter, behind the people working the register, were little slides. And sometimes they would have a certain amount of sandwiches, and you'd put in your order, and the person would turn around and they'd grab the cheeseburger and they'd grab the hamburger, and then there would be fries sliding down on another spot and hand you your beverage, and you'd be gone. It would be just it's already prepared. Um,
Fast food, when fast food was fast.
when it
That's what
was
I'm talking about.
And you didn't have much selection, but if you wanted better selection, you would go to an actual sit-down restaurant. But if you were in a hurry, or your family was going grocery shopping that night, and then just wanted a quick meal, you would go to fast food, go to McDonald's. Um, and that's what I remember from the 70s. And it was limited items and just bang, 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 quick. And then, of course, being a preteen in the 70s, you a cheeseburger and fries were enough. And this was pre-Happy Meal. That came, I think, might have been in the early 80s, because I think I was kind of frustrated because by then I graduated to bigger burgers, but my sister, who was 5 years younger, was able to get a Happy Meal. And you might have the same thing, because I know your brother's the same age as my sister.
That's when it used to come in the cool cardboard. It would have a carrying case. It kind of looked like a cardboard McDonald's or whatever. Now they just give it to you in a wrinkled up brown bag, same everything else comes in. But yeah, so I mean, that's what I remember, that limited menu. I remember, everything. You had like 4 items. And then you had just either Coke or Sprite or orange pop. The flat orange pop that they have, the high
Well,
C crap.
it was orange drink, and it was whenever you had an elementary school fun day, they would get the McDonald's orange drink, and they would come in and like just have it in paperboard cartons like milk is, and then they'd pour it in, and they'd pour some water into big, like the 5-gallon uh, cooler, or the with the spout,
Trough.
yeah. And then there'd be generic cookies, and then we'd be doing whatever fun event in elementary school, including sometimes one person would get to go to the computer lab because there was one computer.
um, so yeah, so I was looking, and like we said, we had 4 menu items, and then I was wondering, do you think chicken McNuggets were the first one without a bun? Here's what I looked them up. So they came out in 1981. They consist of small pieces of reconstituted boneless chicken meat that have been battered and deep fried. So what reconstituted, that word kind of freaks me out a little bit. But they said they were designed by McDonald's first executive chef, Rene Arnad, a native of Luxembourg, created the chicken McNuggets recipe in 1979. So it took them 2 years to come out with it after, I guess and do you know that they came out in 4 shapes? I did not know they came out in 4 basic shapes.
I had
Did you know
seen that recently, that there's like names to the shapes. I had noticed as a teenager that they were kind of shaped. There were different ones. They weren't just all round the same. That they were different shapes. But I didn't know that they had names or a purpose. And
I just saw they had a boot. Okay, so it was a bell, a boot, a bow tie, and a ball. I guess they liked the bees, the 4 bees. I would always recognize the boot, and I was like, why does this look like a boot, and why is there other ones that look like boots? I didn't really recognize, and then I'd see the round one. I call them round. I didn't know they were balls, but yeah. So I didn't really recognize that there was 4 shapes. I guess I was just like, why did some look similar to the others? But that was about it.
They were Tom Brady balls. They were deflated, so that's why I didn't recognize it as a ball.
Ooh,
and I was wondering how many Michelin stars the McNuggets would get, since the Rene from Luxembourg was the executive chef. When it's basic, I feel it's like it's everything but the beak and the feathers, and then extruded out into these shapes. But what McDonald's got right with them, and that
did you ever bite into a piece of cartilage on one of those? I've done that. Haven't done it lately, but I did it when they first came out a lot. Yeah,
exactly. What McDonald's got right, and other places that I've had them are not quite the same, is the crisp and lightness of the batter, compared to, at least when they're done right, compared to other fast food places, or when you get them at home, is definitely better. So maybe there is some merit to this executive chef in 79 and taking 2 years to get it because they are better than any other places
Yeah,
nuggets. They're even better than Buffalo Wild Wings boneless.
and I think it was the dipping sauces that kind of made it. You could get the barbecue or the honey mustard. And I think that kind of was like the magic touch because like I said when you ordered before that the sandwiches, of course you weren't dipping them into sauces or anything, but
For some people, it's
and,
yeah,
and
it's an
then since we're
excuse to get to just basically eat sauce with an excuse to have a reason to eat some of these sauces.
my favorite McDonald's story since we're talking 79, 81, the 1980 Olympics when they came out with the if America wins a gold medal, you get like a quarter pounder. If they win you'd get the little tickets, and if they won they won a silver medal, you'd get a French fries. If they won a bronze, you'd get a free drink. And they planned that out before Russia boycotted the Olympics. So America just swept everything. Or this was the 84. I'm
84
sorry,
would have been
84
the
Los
Summers.
Angeles Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we boycotted the 80 in Moscow. So this was 1984, where the same thing. You got, like I said, you got the gold medal, you got the meal, silver, you got the fries, and bronze, you got the drink. And they did that. they made that before Russia boycotted the LA games, and so I remember just giving them out to like, oh, I can't have another French fry. I was just handing them out to people because I was like, you were just winning everything.
Right.
They
Yeah.
lost their shirt in that. I mean, everything was free. It was just
I would imagine they always would seem to be a big tie-in to the Olympics because I am a Olympics fan. I'm kind of frustrated. NBC used to have an Olympic channel on our cable, and they don't anymore. And I'm kind of
I think
sad. I
yeah,
don't get
that's
to
right. I
watch
think I lost
I don't
mine.
get to watch the biathlon, um, or
Yeah.
or downhill skiing or stuff in the winter and curling and all that. It's gone. Although YouTube you can find stuff. But yeah, McDonald's is a huge tie-in. I mean, McDonald's is kind of the 800-pound gorilla of fast food in the 70s. Um, and in the 80s, at least in the area where we lived, I know that if you watch on the History Channel, there's the foods that made America, and they go into these kind of rivalries between, and one of them is McDonald's and Burger King, and they also had one. I think it was like the Good Humor ice cream versus something else, and um, nationwide, Burger King seemed to have a bigger presence. But here in Minnesota, where I grew up and you grew up, Burger King was kind of a late inroad into it.
Yeah, I never understood why McDonald's was so much more popular than Burger King. Doesn't Burger King their burgers kind of taste better? I don't. Is that just me? But McDonald's is always more popular for sure.
McDonald's kind of had their first and bigger presence, but I do believe Burger King stuff tastes better when it's done right. However, where I live now, if the Burger King um, burnt to the ground and never reopened, that would be an improvement. It's just the one where I live is terrible. We don't go there anymore because it's just we've had so many problems
The,
with it.
the one where I live, I always go when I want to hear an argument because they're always when I pull up to the drive-through window, they're always in the middle of a huge full-on argument every time. So it kind of gives you a little room to pause. But the one before we get out of the fast food here, remember we were talking about how you used to get the full box with the Happy Meal. What about the glasses? So at first we had the ET Star Wars glasses, the collector glasses, and you'd always get the same one 3 times in a row before they switched it up, and then you'd get the new one that came out. So you'd have like 3 Spocks, and I guess that's the holy grail. I don't remember that, but the search for Spock was the most popular, and those were Taco Bell. I don't remember Taco Bell giving out glasses.
No, I
But
don't.
I guess the search for Spock, Taco Bell are the holy grail of collector's glasses. But what do you remember about the glasses?
Well, I
Brian?
remember, yeah, it would be depending on which McDonald's you go to, if it's a high volume or low volume. Um, some of them would run out and they wouldn't go into the next set, and then some of them would have so many of them that if you went there 4 weeks after, you could get the first week the rare one. So people started figuring that out if they're trying to get their set, that they try to figure out where the slow McDonald's are. We had 2 different sets of Disney ones, I think around like the Disney's, I don't know if it was like 75th anniversary or something like that. And they were high quality glasses. I mean, they could go through the
Mm-hmm.
dishwasher and the paint and everything last. We just finally had gotten rid of them. Someone would have probably bought them off of us.
The collector's glasses, I remember even like Planters peanuts and Welch's jelly, they would have like, as soon as you finish it off, you'd wash it out because they'd have like a collector's glass also. Do you remember that? Those, like in the grocery store, the things that came in, everything came in glass. And so like they would have like collectors, like the Planters peanuts. I had a Minnesota Vikings one, like with a handle on it. It was like a mug. So once the peanuts were gone, you just washed it out and there you had a Vikings mug that's Planters peanuts on it, you know. And then just finally, I remember the collector glasses went into plastic cups where you'd get kind of like a stadium, the same cups you get in a stadium, those plastic cups. And those weren't too bad either. I kind of like those. You could stack them and, yeah, and they had the pictures on the side. I remember it was probably like the Return of the Jedi era when they started kicking them.
Yeah, I think that happened kind of almost simultaneously between fast food and movie theaters and stadiums, where you started to have the plastic instead of just the paper cup that you would just throw away afterwards. It was a more durable cup you could bring home, and you can still get those to this day. I remember we brought some home when we had gone to a football bowl game and different movies. Like if you're a fan of Thor or whatever, you could have them.
And just my final, do you remember the McDLT with the, and I think the reason they got rid of it because it used a metric ton of styrofoam to put that thing together. But
Well, yeah, because it was like the cold side would stay cold and the hot side would stay hot. So this is probably once McDonald's became more about the drive-through than instead of just the sit-down part, right? Because at one point in time, McDonald's, they may not, some of them may not even have had drive-throughs, and then they added the drive-through, and then it became almost predominantly drive-through, and then even during COVID, it was entirely drive-through, that you would take your stuff and get home, and then the McDLT with the take off of a BLT with tomato and lettuce, and it'd have on one side of the massive amount of styrofoam to stay cool, and then the other side would be hot, and it's like it never worked.
and I guess I was a tip for our listeners. There's a YouTube video where you can still make the McDLT. I think it's like you go in and you order a quarter pounder with cheese, but you order all the toppings on the side, and it's basically a McDLT because you just basically what it is the cheese isn't melted and it makes it taste more fresh. We think melted cheese is a good thing, but is that melted stuff they put on McDonald's? I don't know if that's a good thing.
I don't know if that's even cheese.
Ooh, and there's the car beeping behind us in the fast food window telling us to move along. Did you have anything else to add, Brian?
I don't have anything else. We will pull off so the next person can get their fast food fix.
Folks, thank you for joining us on another episode of the 70s versus the 80s. We will be back with some more shows. I got another crazy clips show coming up, and that's right, we're going to the 1990s on the 70s versus the 80s. We're going to have a grunge buffet crazy clips show, so if you want to hear Kurt Cobain and Billy Corgan getting an argument at a buffet restaurant, this is the show for you. Otherwise, I think we might do another 70s versus 80s baseball episode for the opening day. So just stick with us at the 70s versus the 80s.
Somebody's